Welcome aboard. Today we're going to be talking about all the kinds of track that are used on the system and how to identify the track based on how it looks or how it functions. Let's start with ballast rail. Now this is the kind of thing you first think of when you think of rail tracks. It's just your general rail that's been used for centuries now. This is used in several areas around the system and are mostly found in high-speed areas. And now, girder rail, also just known as paved rail. If you're ever in downtown Portland or Hillsborough or anywhere that's just where the trains are running street level, then you will find some paved rail. Don't ever drive on these unless you're on Portland streetcar tracks. You can drive on Portland streetcar tracks, you cannot drive on Max tracks. These are used in mostly just the low-speed areas and any metropolitan areas that, where the trains are serving the actual streets. The Portland streetcar uses almost nothing but paved rail. But we're not really going to be talking about the Portland streetcar much. The Max doesn't use a ton of paved rail, pretty much just downtown Portland and downtown Hillsborough. So now let's move on to some of the terminology of what some of the tracks are called. So let's start with this picture here. This is called a tail track. A tail track is just a set of tracks, it could be one or more than one, that extends from the last station on a line. There are two examples of this. One of them is this picture here at Cleveland Avenue in Gresham, and the other one is at Clackamas Town Center on the Green Line, which just extends into one track. These are just to allow for trains to be stored. They're not really used much these days. They were in the 90s because there was a very unusual practice of parking the trains in there and then taking them back out to go into the yard. I'll probably talk about that at a later date. Next up are pocket tracks. Pocket tracks are found commonly all throughout the system. Most of the Max alignment has two tracks side by side. One track carries trains going in one direction, the other track carries trains going in the other direction. Now, if there's, again, to store trains or to turn trains around, there could be a pocket track, which is a third track that goes in between the two mainline tracks. There are several of these throughout the Max system. Notably, Hollywood Transit Center has one east of the station, which is what you're looking at here. Beaverton Transit Center has one, which is where the Red Line parks. There's one by the Fair Complex Max Station. There's one at Mount Hood Avenue, one in Southeast Main Street. Next up are siding tracks. Now these are different from pocket tracks. It is also a third track that branches off from the mainline tracks, but it goes on the side of the main line rather than between your mainline tracks. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture because it goes underneath the Broadway bridge, but this is the one known as the Broadway siding. There's also an interesting one by the Lloyd Center called the Doubletree siding because it's by Doubletree Hotel. And these tracks just veer off from your main route and, again, used for storing trains and for turning trains back around. Now, terminus stations also have siding tracks, some of them. Hatfield in downtown Hillsborough, Expo Center, and Southeast Park Avenue in Milwaukee all have third tracks at their terminus, meaning it's a siding track that is used to, again, store extra trains, or in the case of the Blue Line, trains might come in there and go out of service or head to the Portland airport. There are a few trips out of the day that run to PDX, all the way from Hillsborough there. They'll park in that siding track. Now we have crossover tracks. These are just designed to get you from one rail to the other. Now, there are single crossovers which are found throughout the whole system. The ones that I'm showing you here are on Burnside Street near Gresham. There are plenty of these, so if you are for some reason running trains on the wrong rail, these tracks will get you back onto the main line. There are also double crossovers, which forms an X in the tracks that gets you from one track to the other, and those are used at all those terminus stations where there is a platform where the trains will rest. Again, like Hatfield, Expo Center, Cleveland Avenue in Gresham, all of these use double crossovers right before the station. which allows the trains to switch tracks to the station, and from the station can switch onto the mainline track once starting their day. The last one I'm going to talk about is loop tracks, or turnarounds. So this is where you have trains that are running on a couplet. It's known as a couplet. So that would be like Yamhill and Morrison streets. Both of these streets in downtown Portland are one-ways. So the track going eastbound to Gresham or to the airport will run down Yamhill Street. But going back the other way, it comes down Morrison Street. And so at the end, connecting from Morrison to Yamhill are 3 tracks that can turn trains around. So if trains are ending in downtown Portland, which doesn't happen normally, but during some special events they will sometimes do that, trains will use those turnaround tracks, and it's that particular one is known as the 11th Avenue turnaround. These are also where the original MAX trains ended when they first opened from Gresham to downtown Portland. They use these tracks to turn back around and go back to Gresham. There's also another turnaround on 5th and 6th Avenues where the green lines run along with the yellow and orange going north and south. Once you get to PSU, you'll notice that there are a couple of tracks, a couple of turnaround tracks. The 11th Avenue turnaround that I talked about earlier has 3 turnaround tracks. The Jackson Street turnaround has 2 turnaround tracks, plus the other track at the bottom heads down to Milwaukee. So if you're taking the orange line and you have come up from Milwaukee, you basically go through the turnaround on that outermost track and then serve the station at PSU. So it's kind of interesting being on those, because normally when trains are in turnarounds, they're out of service. With the exception of orange line trains that have just come from Milwaukee. They go through the turnaround, and so kind of interesting to be able to ride through it now. So now you know what I'm talking about whenever I mention pocket tracks, or tail tracks, or siding tracks. Some of these you might already have known, like you probably already knew what siding tracks were. You may have even known what crossovers were, just maybe not without knowing the name, or something similar to that. So now, if somebody were to ask me, hey, where does the red line start? Well, now I could tell you the red line starts at Beaverton Transit Center's pocket track. And you'd know exactly what I'm talking about, because the red line ends in that pocket track currently. Now they're going to be doing that red line project where it'll extend all the way up to the fair complex, and that will be old information. But as of right now, red line trains are still using the pocket track at Beaverton Transit Center to turn around. There's also a pocket track at Gateway that goes into the station, through the station, so there are 3 tracks at Gateway as well. We're going to be doing an entirely separate video on Gateway, because let's face it, it's kind of mind-numbing to think about how Gateway works. Because if you ever look at Gateway on TriMet's map, you'll notice that it is the spot. Anything east of Gateway, all the lines start to branch. We're not really getting into that right now, but yeah. It's kind of crazy. And while we're here at Gateway thinking about all this, I want to show you what this loop track is here. I've showed it before, and it is kind of crazy. But this track here is known as the fishhook. It's shaped like a fishhook. The red lines go in both directions on this thing. So if I'm ever talking about the fishhook, or trains going on the fishhook, or here's a look at the fishhook, if I ever am talking about the fishhook, I am not talking about fishing in the Willamette or Columbia, Clackamas rivers. No, I'm talking about this roller coaster spin track that is on the red line at Gateway. Yeah, the red line likes to be a roller coaster that way, so if I ever mention the fishhook, then that's the nickname that was given to this track here. Well, I thank you for watching this episode today, and I thank you for watching me ramble on for however many minutes about tracks. So next time we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty with the system. We are going to be talking about signals. So buckle down and get ready to learn stuff, because it's going to be kind of hectic. But I want to teach it to you in the simplest way possible, so you can look forward to that on the next one. I'll see you soon.